Hey everybody, I'm Russo, and I do a little work here and there. You are watching Raconteur Weekly, and this week we might as well say we're taking it back to the basics, because we're talking about articulating papercraft. And while we are discussing the basics, I do suppose I'll probably talk a little bit about some more advanced, or at least alternative, techniques. Cross that bridge when we come to it, nothing too crazy, so don't worry. So first, Papercraft articulation at its more or less simplest is a two-part system, those two parts being the tube and the cylinder. A cylinder, of course, is a solid thing, and a tube is a not solid thing. Yeah. For my demonstration, I am using these birchwood sticks from All Season Professional. Really, the type of stick that you use will be dependent upon the project that you are working on. In my case, a demo, so it doesn't matter. These birchwood sticks have a diameter of about 1/8 an inch or 3 millimeters, give or take. But any stick, any size would work, or you could roll your own out of paper, though those do tend to be a little weaker, so I wouldn't really suggest it. The idea from here will be to roll and glue whatever paper you have around the stick, not to the stick. That wouldn't work out as well. And a few tips here. To glue this now, I'm using Elmer's washable school glue in Disappearing Purple. And really, your glue choice is just that, your glue choice. But this choice, the washable school glue stick, is one that comes with a caution because I do like to strengthen things up a bit with super glue later on, and if you take the washable school glue stick route, you probably want to let that dry completely before applying the super glue. Of course, the only reason I say this is because I like to use a brush-on super glue, and brushing it on things that are, wet, I guess, like this, is a surefire way to get gummy glue in no time. So try to stay away from that. But yeah, that is basically that. You have your cylinder, which is our stick here, and your tube, which is now represented by a tube. Once this is all set, you can cut things down to size, etc., etc. And I know what you're thinking, this doesn't really look like Papercraft, but this would be the inside of Papercraft. Papercraft at its heart is boxes. Boxes glued to other boxes. So instead of gluing two boxes together, you'd cut a little hole and install a tube before installing a cylinder into the opposite box. Now, alternatively, you can double up and just have a peg with tube-made holes in both of the parts, but I do think that would be a little bit more prone to slipping, and if the idea is that you want to get things in a particular pose or what have you, then slippage is definitely not your friend. So now we'll bring in this little guy, or part of a little guy, to talk about the trifecta. That is the tube and T. So in this case, instead of just using a cylinder and a tube, I've made my own version of what I guess you could compare to PVC pipe fittings or anything like that. So if we take this guy apart, you can make out the two T's. Not that it's important to have two T's, but this does. The T in the head runs from front to back, which allows a left to right head movement, and the T in the chest runs from shoulder to shoulder, which allows an up and down or forward and back movement. The other thing you'll notice about the one that's in the chest is that it has a tube built into it, which allows for movement on a third axis, which is fine and dandy, except that you have to be a little bit careful about placement. Speaking of which, you might have noticed that the two T's are perpendicular. If they were parallel, then you'd have more of a double knee type joint, the sort of thing that you would see in an action figure if you got the right kind. Also noteworthy is the ability to extend these joints, though you are limited by the length of the tube and cylinder that link pieces together. But yeah, that's sort of the logical conclusion of the simplest form, in my mind at least, of Papercraft articulation. The tube and cylinder, and you see this in a lot of places. Shoulders, necks, tank turrets. And there are even subtle variations. I mentioned necks, but most of those are not a standard cylinder. They are, truncated cones? Look at some Gundam Papercraft and eventually you'll see what I'm talking about. Also, if you're interested in this little guy, it is part, at least, of a design by BCEman, and I have a link in the description to where you can find more information on that. Regardless, this is what it would look like had it made it out of this early prototype stage. But we'll move that out of the way to talk about something a little more advanced, or at least out there, since, out there is sort of what I do. And it can be found in this, a Devil Joe foot, which I realize some of you may not have seen yet, but you know what? It's fine. I mean, here it is now, and though it might not be the best demonstration of the, method, you can see that the toes move around. Look inside the joints and you see wire. Look in the back of the foot and you see epoxy putty. So basically that is the long and the short of it. But as you can imagine, this does take a bit of planning because any joint that moves needs the clearance to be able to move. Truth be told, this could use a little extra cutting to get the range of movement that I'm really after. But in all, it's a pretty good choice and a great compromise between rigidity and weight and the sort of flexibility that you expect from paper, or bendability, whatever. So I'm going to leave things there and say that you can expect a demonstration of the actual method for this. If I look up to my computer, I can see part of our pal Devil Joe, and the part that is highlighted in red here is what I will cover. We get a good sort of second ankle joint there, and it's not too complicated just yet. So yeah, look forward to that, and until next time, you've been watching Raconteur Weekly on Rousseau Works, and I'm Rousseau. Out.